palabra Sara Durán González, University of Edinburgh, The Foolish Lord of the Lord of Fools, the Shakespearean King Lear, Full Duality in Akira Kurosawa's Run. Muy largo el título.
Muchas gracias, Carles. Muchas gracias al comité organizador por darme esta oportunidad de estar aquí. Y sin más, paso a mi comunicación. The Foolish Lord of the Lord of Fools, the King Lear Full Duality in Akira Kurosawa's Run. Even after a first reading of King Lear, anyone who has made the worthy effort of looking beyond the surface of this jewel of this Shakespearean canon will realize that, although brief, the role of the King's Fool is crucial in the story. As Fawkes points out in the introduction to the Arden edition of the play, the Fool's dramatic importance in the play seems much greater than his role. His an unexplained disappearance during Act 3 and the subsequent unfolding of the events without the need of his involvement do not diminish the significance of the roles he plays up to that point. A playful jester, a wise commentator, a discloser of unpleasant truths, and a faithful companion to a declining king, the Fool is much more than a momentary comic relief in a world of ferocious cruelty. If we turn to the ways in which this seemingly secondary character has been portrayed and transformed, we soon find that the reinterpretation Akira Kurosawa made of the Fool in Rang draws on this understanding of the actual centrality of the king's jester. Kurosawa's Kiyoami not only fulfills the part that Shakespeare devised for his Fool, but goes even further, accompanying his master, the feudal lord Hidetora Ichimonji, the equivalent of Lear, from beginning to end. If, as Fawkes notes, most representations of the Fool give most weight to his close relationship with Lear, Kurosawa's wine strives to surpass them all. Through a series of careful narrative choices and meaningful cinematographic devices, Kurosawa shows us that the constant play on words made in King Lear to identify the Fool and the king can be more than just a game. But before setting off to explore the ways in which Kurosawa manages to turn these two characters into two sides of the same coin, there are a couple of generalities about the overall conception of Rang which are worth noting. First of all, although the basis of Shakespearean material which underlies the film is undeniable, most of Kurosawa's characters are, to varying degrees, amalgams of two or more of Shakespeare's characters. Significantly enough, Kiyoami and Hidetora are maybe the two characters who stay closer to their English counterparts, in spite of some minor alterations. But despite these changes and the general blending of characters, Kurosawa is careful enough to offer his viewers a clue which directly links the central characters of the film to those in Shakespeare's play. Unfortunately, since this Shakespearean-like clue puts the emphasis on linguistic nuances, it goes unnoticed for most non-Japanese viewers. The kanji, a central piece in the Japanese writing system, are characters which, roughly speaking, have one or several meanings and possible pronunciations. Since pronunciations are also commonly shared among kanji, there are often a few possible combinations of them which would phonetically render the same name. The choice of which of those combinations to use is often based on the meaning of the kanji themselves, thus turning Japanese proper names into very meaningful words. Kurosawa takes advantage of this to turn the names of his main characters into sometimes ironic representations of themselves. The names of the three sons directly link them to their English sisters, whether in an ironic or a straightforward way. But the kanji choice Kurosawa made is even more significant with the central dramatic couple of his film, Hidetora and Kiyoami. The meaning of Hidetora's name can roughly be translated as the one who surpasses the tiger. Kurosawa portrays him as being indeed more violent than a tiger, something which he very visually reflects in Hidetora's tiger-like face, while he unnecessarily kills an inedible boar during the opening scene of the film. A boar which, as J. Lawrence Gardner notes, comes to represent Hidetora himself, a victim of unreasonable violence. But in Kurosawa's carefully crafted naming plan, the most priceless piece is Kiyoami. His name is made up of the characters meaning insane, flatter, and increasingly, and thus becomes a description not of Kiyoami himself, but of Hidetora Lear, a man who readily accepts the flattery of his oldest children, surrendering his power to them and becoming increasingly mad after their betrayal. Thus, Kiyoami's name is only the first of many elements which serve to identify him with Hidetora. The second general aspect of Rang, which is worth noting, is the overall pictorial approach to filmmaking which Kurosawa displays in the film. In Constantini Corneda's words, Rang is a series of meticulously elaborated frames that distinguish a lyric narrative, a succession of visual tableaux carefully composed by the director himself. In Rang, every shot is almost a living painting. Camera movement is scarce, consisting mostly of slow pans, even during the great battle scenes. Therefore, framing and composition become essential in conveying the underlying meanings of the film, including the symbiotic relationship between the fool and the feudal lord. Throughout Run, as throughout King Lear, we see the progressive descent of the protagonist from a powerful figure of authority to an insane old man. But whereas in the original play, the fool is no longer needed and disappears when Lear becomes a fool himself, as folks notes, Hietora's insanity makes the loyal Kiyoami come closer to him. In the film, this is visually reflected with the use of framing. When Hietora shows his strength, Kiyoami is systematically kept out of the frame. It is only when Hietora has already given up his power that Kiyoami reappears to hand him some arrows and hold his sword. And it is only when Hietora is about to faint after leaving Jiro's castle that Kiyoami literally runs into the frame to help him. Something similar happens at Surumaru's hut. When Hietora recovers consciousness and Tango says he is himself again, Kiyoami disappears from the frame. However, as soon as Hietora proves to be still disturbed, the camera moves with him as he raises his body and Kiyoami comes into view again. Here Kurosawa introduces another visual element which delves into the identification of both characters. As you can see in the image, when Hietora raises to a sitting position, we see him next to Kiyoami, who is in a very similar position and has almost the same facial expression. The only difference is that Kiyoami appears a little higher in the frame, as if we were seeing a younger and stronger Hietora who has gradually become that pitiful old man that we see next to him. This is only the first of a collection of shots which appear throughout the movie, showing Seven and Master as two identical figures, only separated by the difference in age now that the feudal lord has lost his rank. Sometimes it is as if the much younger Kiyoami was contemplating the wretched future that awaits him, and in fact all the other characters. Nevertheless, this link, as everything else in Rang and King Lear, is an unstable one. The moments when Kiyoami gets tired of nursing Hietora grow more and more common as the plot unfolds. When the link between the two characters wakens, the separation is visually marked by the use of the short reverse shot technique, as when they are left alone at the ruined castle of the Sue family. Hietora has totally lost contact with reality, and Kiyoami significantly says, "I used to be the fool, but now the coin is flipped," and asks Hietora to speak nonsense while he speaks truth. During the subsequent conversation, the short reverse shot technique is used to offer us a series of mid shots in which we only see one of them until Hietora has a new outbreak of insanity and Kiyoami enters his frame again. But even more common than the reverse shots showing the characters' separation are the shots which serve to symbolize their unison. A very particular shot composition, which you can also see there repeated throughout the film, is that which shows us both characters, one of them looking at and the other turning his back to us. It is as if by having these complementary visions of the two of them, we were given the whole picture of a single character. For example, when Kiyoami puts this helmet made of weeds on Hiedora's head, we simultaneously see Kiyoami's back and Hiedora's happy face at having recovered one symbol of his former power. This scene clearly parallels the appearance of Shakespeare's Lear with a crown of weeds, although here, very significantly, it is the fool that makes the crown for the feudal lord. The helmet scene also deals with the theme of natural imagery, which is as crucial in the film as it is in the play, and which will also link fool to lord once again. After the battle of the third castle, which marks the onset of Hiedora's madness, he is seen in an extreme long shot, abandoning the burning castle and walking towards a lifeless nature. With the use of a cross-cutting technique, Kurosawa momentarily shows us Kiyoami and Tango in another extreme long shot, riding through the same lifeless nature towards the burning castle in search of their master. When the three of them finally meet, it is at the grassy plains. Their nature is still unwelcoming. A storm is breaking while a phantom like Hietora picks up the few flowers that he finds, the only bits of bright color in the gloomy environment. The ephemeral bouquet that he puts together, and that you can see there, will have a greater significance as a prop than it seems. Hietora is the first to pick up flowers, but once again, his actions are repeated by Kiyoami, who picks flowers to decorate Hiedora's false helmet, and more importantly, to put together another bouquet, which he carries in his hands next to Hiedora's dead body during the final funeral march. Kurosawa shows us how Kiyoami, as if he actually was a younger Hietora, keeps on repeating his master's behaviors, also in relation to another crucial topic, the role of gods in human existence. While Lear keeps on invoking divine punishments which never come, Hietora reminds us that Buddha and his guardians have led the evil world. At the end of the film, after Sabura's and Hiedora's tragic deaths, heartbroken Kiyoami recovers Hiedora's claims and questions the mercy and the overall existence of the gods. While Tango replies that they can do nothing to stop the fratricide violence of men. Just as King Lear ends with the feeling that no divine justice has been able to prevent the tragedy, Run's ending, an example of how, in Hapgood's words, Kurosawa pushes Shakespeare to extremes, points to the tragic impossibility of avoiding the doom to which humans condemn themselves, a vision further emphasized by the godlike point of view in which we, the mere spectators, are put during much of the film. As Tango points out, the only thing gods can do in the face of man-made chaos is weeping, and the question of weeping is another preeminent one that Kurosawa transposed from Shakespeare's play to his film to further emphasize the Hidetora-Kiyoami duality. In King Lear, it is Lear who struggles with his tears at various moments, but in Run, Hidetora is hardly ever seen crying. Instead, his emotional side is mostly transported to Kiyoami, who consistently cries about the miseries of his other half. Kurosawa makes Kiyoami's weeping a standout, his sobbing clearly heard in an otherwise silent environment, and his sorrowful gestures clearly seen. While Hidetora remains similarly unfeeling, except for his sudden outbursts of horror at his own past cruelty, Kiyoami's overexpressions of a wide range of emotions are constant. This, together with his physical appearance, makes him quite an ambiguous character in the context of feudal Japan. At some points, it is almost easy to mistake him for a woman. However, this ambiguity is consistent with what Shakespeare intended for the fool, who is never described in the play. Here, Kurosawa made a very clever casting choice hiring Peter, a transvestite artist, to portray the equally ambiguous Kiyoami. Although Kiyoami's ambiguity, as the emotional side of Hidetora never totally disappears, it softens as the story unfolds. Kiyoami evolves as a character much as Shakespeare's fool does. Both fools, although remarking on the master's foolishness from the beginning, start the way in the story as playful jesters, and gradually transform into more serious commentators. However, keeping on with this vision of the relationship between Lord and Fool, Kurosawa makes this evolution another part of the linking thread between Hidetora and Kiyoami. In Run, as Hidetora increasingly turns into a fool, Kiyoami begins to resemble Hidetora more and more. The mocking songs and dances he performs at the beginning become almost harsh attacks and exhibitions of warrior-like movements. His tone grows more serious, his voice manlier, his body language closer to that of the former warlord. Kiyoami begins to turn into a younger Hidetora, even thinking about the law's past cruelty, using the first-person pronoun as if it was his own. We see how both Hidetora and Kiyoami end up trapped into a roller coaster of mutual pity and violence. One day, Hidetora saves Kiyoami's life, the next he wipes him for telling the truth. Similarly, Kiyoami tends to the needs of his insane lord one minute and fiercely shakes him the next. Hapgood notes how, as with other of his Shakespearean figures, Kurosawa highlights Hidetora's guilt, but he is not the only one who is haunted by guilt. As usual, Kiyoami follows suit. In the film, they both become increasingly aware of and sorrowful about their cruelty to others. Hidetora and Kiyoami's evolution is a complementary one, which makes them even more in one the same entity. A fact even more emphasized with the final and crucial element, color. In his portrayal of a gloomy world of chaos, Kurosawa establishes a sharp contrast between the progressively dark colors of an upset nature and the bright basic colors worn by the humans who have outraged it. As Judith Buchanan well says, for all its moral chaos, a more aesthetically beautiful or ordered film could scarcely be imagined. The Japanese director turns the key scenes of the film, especially the bloody battles, into huge explosions of color, which are as upsetting to the soul as appealing to the eye. In contrast with the courageous but dangerous yellow of Taro, the celebratory but bloody red of Jiro, and the juvenile but serene blue of Saburo, Hidetora first appears dressed in white, symbolizing the purity he will gain as a peaceful retired warrior. I don't know if you can see it very well in the image on the left. But also the death that awaits behind his decision. Kiyoami's clothes in the initial sequence very symbolically unite all these colors. He is frequently shown to be a careful observer, and as such, all the true colors of the rest are displayed in him. But colors also evolve. During the seemingly happy times to come, both the Lord's and the Fool's clothes are bright and colorful. This changes, however, with Hidetora's progressive descent into madness and Kiyoami's continuous transformation into a younger image of his lord. Hidetora exits the third castle with his skin pale as a ghost and covered with a white and red kimono. What were colors of celebration when he entered the castle turned into the colors of death and blood after the place had been covered with the equally red blood of his men. Meanwhile, Kiyoami's colorful garments change into a duller outfit when they occupy the ruined castle of the Sue family. There is much more white on his clothes, and the other colors are not as bright as before, with the exception of his bloody red socks and belt. The dominant colors of Hidetora's and Kiyoami's garments end up being the same, as happens with their gestures, behaviors, and ideas. Kurosawa emphasizes over and over again the duality of their character, to the point that it would be impossible for the fool to disappear from Durán as he does from King Lear, without leaving the audience puzzled. Surprisingly enough, the only two characters whose individual identity can be readily traced back to the Shakespearean source are the ones who are more mixed up in the end. Kurosawa uses every resource at hand to turn the almost secondary playful Shakespearean motif of the king becoming a fool into one of the most powerful driving forces of his story. In a world that is even more filled with violence and chaos than that of King Lear, Kiyomi's ultimately kind-hearted nature is one of the few reliefs that Kurosawa's doomed humanity has. His symbolic relationship with Hidetora provides the director with a means to show the whole range of human emotions and sufferings, while raising questions as important as the unavoidable decay to which we are all ultimately destined, or the very human need for mutual support to survive in a hostile environment. In Durán, Kurosawa answers Ken's indirect question at the end of King Lear about how Lear could have endured such a painful situation for so long. It was thanks to his faithful fool. The question that remains unanswered in this cross-cultural version of the story is that of how Kiyomi will now endure life without his other half. In the end, he's just as helpless as the blind Tsurumaru at the edge of the cliff. Thank you very much for your attention.